Okay, for once, let me try to break down the disappointing elements of Sly Cooper Thieves in Time without being an asshole. Simply put, it was the first Sly Cooper game to totally stray from the vibe and atmospheric tonality of the original Sly Cooper. This always brings into question the classic debate, does storytelling really matter as much as gameplay? But I think most would agree it was the clever storytelling that made a Sly Cooper game engaging, because the lasting impression left on us from that series was the experience of a playable graphic novel. And I fell in love with the consistency of always picking up where you left off with sequels to the original Sly Cooper. Notice how the style of Sly 2 just ever so slightly builds on the art style of Sly 1, and then how Sly 3 nearly looks identical to the art style of Sly 2. That aspect allowed players to feel like they were jumping right back into the world of Sly Cooper after the downtime between sequels, which is why I took issue with the overly cartoony art style of both the character design in the gameplay segments and cutscenes in Thieves in Time. It no longer had the gritty tone of a graphic novel. Now it was a cartoon, and a very silly one at that. Hence, there was never any true feeling of looming danger or fear that the hero may not overcome the odds, which is an essential aspect of any hero's journey. And while most of us that dislike Thieves in Time praise the original trilogy, there is something that needs to be said for the weakest link in that story arc, Sly 3, which played well but suffered the same flaws as every third installment from any popular movie franchise, at least in terms of the plot and story elements. Part 3 syndrome usually sounds a little something like this. Fuck, we've made it to Part 3? Well, we already built upon Part 1 in Part 2. I guess now it's time to throw in a wild card and shake things up a bit. After all, this is the third fucking time we're telling a story with these characters. Nothing wrong with any of that, but that's why it happens to be my least favorite. And if you haven't noticed, Sanzaru expanded more on Sly 3 than it built on the source material from the original, and they seem to get their idea of what a Sly Cooper game is directly from Sly 3, which is undoubtedly the game with the silliest elements from the original trilogy. It's the most lighthearted, least stealthy, most over the top, and overstuffed with conflicting elements in terms of plot and story. Is it fun to play? Yeah, as long as you enjoy playing as 5 other fucking characters. I prefer to just play as Sly, Bentley, and Murray. But again, Part 3 syndrome. Rocky 3. Fuck it, let's have Rocky fight Hulk Hogan. After all, this is the third fucking Rocky. Let's get wild. Spider-Man 3. Let's have the Sandman, Harry Osborn as basically the Hobgoblin, and do we have time for Venom? Well, not really, but fuck it, let's throw him in there. This is the third fucking Spider-Man after all, right? Let's get crazy. But if you had to compare to a Hollywood Part 3, I'd say Sly 3 is most comparable to the Expendables 3. And while that's a series I also adore, the theme is similar. Let's bring out a gang of silly motherfuckers doing wild shit and saying wild shit to take on a mission. And since it's a third game, and I don't really have too much bad to say about Sly 3, we're gonna keep it at just that, 3. So here we go, my top 3 least favorite aspects of Sly 3's plot, storytelling, and dialogue. Number 3, the lack of believability. This relates to what's comparable about Sly 3 to the Expendables 3. The objective in Sly 3 is to assemble the best of the best in order to take on the biggest heist the Cooper gang has ever attempted, supposedly. Part of the journey is meeting these new team members one by one and recruiting them throughout the game. Nearly each level involved taking down a villain from a different part of the world, as well as the recruitment of another team member from that part of the world or that segment in the game, which is intended to make for an even more elaborate final mission, which involves the newly expanded upon Cooper gang. The problem is all these additional characters suck ass. The silly factor has been ramped up to an extent where I can't believe I'm expected to believe that this crew of doofy nutjobs were necessary additional members to the newly expanded upon Cooper gang. I've been given no reason to believe that these guys are the best at what they do, criminal experts, even highlighting how much Dimitri's appeal just came from him being amusing more so than him being a villain you ever really feared or felt would be a challenge to defeat. It was nice to see him again, yeah, but then you play as him, and holy fuck. Recruiting the Panda King was so bizarre, really highlighting the way Sucker Punch laid the foundation of this tragic tale of a young boy whose parents were murdered and then just said, fuck it, let's play that down as much as we can. It is an E-rated game after all. Let's have Sly team up with one of his parents' killers. Again, Part 3 syndrome. It has the writers thinking, what could be better for a Part 3 than teaming up a villain from Sly 1 and a villain from Sly 2, making the whole series feel conclusive in this final chapter. I get it. But fuck, this was poor execution. And if you had to bring back a member of the Fiendish Five, could it have been someone more exciting than the Panda King? I know Mugshot's in there too, he would have been my preferred villain, but this just seems to be another bullshit excuse to poorly acknowledge the original, so that's whatever to me also. I've honestly always blanked out of my mind that Penelope was ever even a part of the series. That's why for Sanzaru to build on her arc in any way showed me that they really focused more on making a sequel to Sly 3 than building on any of the groundwork laid before it. And if you ask me, this newly expanded upon team just looks like a giant mess of fucking goofballs that I'm expected to believe are criminal experts without a demonstration of criminal expert demeanor. I'm expected to believe they're skilled because the script says so. They weren't badass, and they could have been more badass, but they went the jokey tongue-in-cheek route instead. Number 2, the switch in tone. While Sly 1 and 2 feel more associated with stealthy crime, that of an Ocean's 11 movie or any secret agent heist movie, Sly 3 feels like an adventure movie. The slick vibe associated with crimes committed under the night sky when the town is asleep and you play as the thieves who stalk the night is gone. Now it purely feels like an adventure. Nothing wrong with that per se, but it's not my preference. Then throw in the idea of singing opera battles with villains, lemonade chugging contests with enemies, and you've lost me. I can keep it as short and sweet as that. It's the main reason I prefer the first two. And number 1, told you this would be a short list, the Battle of Egos. On top of the number of elements already at play to make Sly 3 feel overly packed with different elements, the writers threw in this ridiculous, cringeworthy excuse for the gang to show loyalty to each other as the idea of whether or not Sly really values Bentley and Murray comes into question.
Do you ever feel like you're playing second fiddle to Sly? Like he treats us as sidekicks?
No way! Sly's cool! We're all in this together!
Sure, we're all here, but are we equal? Who went into the vault? Sly. By himself.
This entire element of Sly 3's script is so cringeworthy, so poorly written, and executed in a manner of how, I don't even know, how kids argue over who's the coolest member of their clubhouse or some shit. It always makes the mission at hand feel so much less threatening, being that the characters even have time to stop and discuss these things. Bentley being jealous of Sly, who's really the most essential part of the gang. What is this kitty conflict bullshit? I can at least see how they wanted to use the cliche of having the villain attempt to turn the gang against each other, so the Cooper gang is less of a threat if there's conflict amongst them, being that they work as a team so well. But the dialogue here gets even cringier, starting with this line right here.
Time does strange things to people. Just look at the real leader of your gang.
Bentley.
Whatever, we're friends, equals.
Then why is it called the Cooper Gang, you self-centered egomaniac?
That's enough.
If you're not an egomaniac, why is your gang called the Cooper Gang? They're not called the Cooper Gang. That's just how the villains refer to them. To my understanding, these three never came up with an official title for their crew and dubbed themselves the Cooper Gang. They're not a fucking band. And then, oh my god, this speech, this fucking monologue by Sly Cooper is so painful to sit through.
We're all individuals. I might be part of all this, a member of the Cooper line, but in the end, I'm just me. Not Henriette, Thaddeus, Slight and Common, Ryoichi, or my father. Just Sly.
The villain presses him about his loyalty to his team, and he comes out with this nicely broken down piece about how all people are individuals, even if they share a common goal. These are real fighting words, educating the villain on the importance of individuality amongst friends. Not my cup of tea, man. Sly 3 is an eventful, yet weak sequel. There's nothing truly terrible about it, but just the act of it simply being a not-so-stellar sequel to two nearly perfect games invites nitpicking. It's a nice piece that's well-structured, but with weak execution in a few areas that start losing my interest. It wraps up the series nicely and does its best to throw a little bit of everything at you all at once, which is what every Part 3 tries to do. It succeeds in some areas and falls short in others, at least if you ask me. Anyway, I'm Savo, and if you enjoy content like this, hit that subscribe button and check out some of my other Sly content. Can anyone in the comments section agree that Sly 3 is an enjoyable, yet imperfect sequel, or is it as perfect as the first two, and am I just an asshole? I'm open to hearing your thoughts, and I'll catch you next time.